This is the Baratza Encore ESP version, and it's one of the most affordable all-around electric grinders on the market right now, meaning that it can do both filter and espresso for the price of $200. Now, is it worth that? That's what we're gonna explore today. Now, the original Encore was for a long time kind of like the dominant grinder for people making coffee at home. There was just one issue with it, and that was that it couldn't really grind well enough or fine enough for espresso. So if you wanted to do espresso, you kind of had to look elsewhere. Otherwise, there was a pretty good chance you were going to end up with an Encore. This one, the ESP, which was sent to me by Baratza, aims to kind of close that gap and kind of give you the best of both worlds. You know, it can do both well, and it only costs about $50 more than the original Encore. A quick overview, you know, as far as build goes, it's almost identical to the original Encore. You know, you have the very similar body, hopper up here, you adjust it by turning the hopper like that. It's got this power switch on the side that's, you know, a little flimsy, and it's got this manual grind button right here. It runs at 550 RPM with a 70-watt motor. So as far as build goes, if you're at all familiar with the Encore line, it's pretty similar. Now, unlike the original Encore, it comes with this little dosing cup right here and a little mat to set it on, which is kind of nice. It does come with the original ground spin as well. And it also comes with an upgraded burr, which is fantastic. The original came with an M1 burr. This one comes with their M2 burr, which is the same as you would see in some of their more expensive grinders. So that's fantastic. One minor change that I'm actually a pretty big fan of is the original came with all these kind of decals plastered all over it. You know, it had big Baratza on the side and Encore right here in cursive. This one is kind of done away with a lot of that, which is good from my perspective. You know, just got simple Baratza up here and that's it. I like that. The biggest change though is when it comes to this adjustment system right here. And Baratza has done something really smart with this. The problem with all-around grinders is espresso needs a very fine tolerance, very small amount between the steps in order to dial in espresso well. The problem with that is filter doesn't need that. It needs a big range. And these two factors are kind of at odds with one another. You know, generally if you get one, you don't get the other until you get into really expensive grinders. What Baratza has done here is they've done some really clever engineering inside so that on this half of the dial, you have very fine steps to help you dial in your espresso the way you want. But on this side, the steps change and they become a lot more coarse so that you can get a much larger range to cover kind of the spectrum of whatever you might want to do as far as filter coffee goes. And what's really cool is when you're adjusting it, you can actually feel a change to go from one to the other. It just feels like one seamless, intuitive adjustment. So for all the really clever engineering that Baratza has done to make that happen, it's really invisible to the person using it. So I kind of like those types of things where somebody has done something really complicated, but then the implementation comes across as really simple. Now on this side right here, there's like 20 settings to play around with here on espresso. In my experience, it's a lot more than you need. And on this side, likewise, you get 20 settings to dial in your filter coffee. This is, in my opinion, definitely the most innovative aspect of this grinder. You know, you can have those fine tolerances for dialing in espresso and kind of seamlessly move into the wider range that's needed with pour over, all in kind of this really condensed and easy to use footprint. Now, speed-wise, you know, I do an 18-gram espresso dose most of the time, and I was finding that would take me, you know, somewhere like 16 seconds. Now, that was single dosing as well, so if you've got the hopper kind of full up with beans, it's going to be a little bit quicker than that. Just one sec. Filter, it's gonna go a little bit quicker, maybe like 2 grams a second. So depending on how big of a filter batch you're doing, you know, you can kind of work out your timing there. I don't know if you saw this or not, but it does come out a little bit clumpy, particularly at espresso settings. But once you get the grinds in your portafilter, you do a little bit of WDT, like there's no kind of really persistent clumps that kind of stick around. Still, generally I recommend using WDT with this grinder just because it is a little bit clumpier coming out like that. One second. Taste-wise, this is a good espresso shot. It leans a little bit more to the complex side and a little bit further away from the clarity side. But, you know, high clarity grinders, they're really expensive. So, you know, for the price, like, this is a shot of coffee that you can expect to be pretty happy with. And the same is true on filter coffee, you know. It edges a little bit more to the side of complexity over clarity, a little bit more leaning onto body. That's kind of run-of-the-mill for conical grinders anyways. And for 200 bucks, you know, the original Encore couldn't even do espresso at all. So you pay an extra 50 bucks and you get the ability to do espresso, which normally comes with a lot higher of a price tag. So that's great. There are a couple things that I don't really love about the Encore. Number one, static was a big issue with the original, and the same is true with this one. You know, when you're doing espresso, it kind of comes out clumpy. It's not a huge deal, but when you're doing filter, like, it really does create a fair bit of static. And if you're using this, which, you know, it's better for batch brew and all that, when you pull the thing out, like, stuff gets everywhere. And I am not a big fan of mess. So that's something I don't love. Also, it's pretty loud. You know, Baratzas kind of have this rep for being loud, and this one is no exception. It's got this kind of annoying sound. So, you know, there's that too. Another negative for me, some people are going to disagree with me on this, and that's fine. I would rate the counter appeal lower than some of the other options out there for sure. And, you know, overall on the build, like, there's some things that are just like a little loose, which kind of adds to that perception that it's like noisy, lower end. But again, for the price, it's hard to argue. So weigh that for what it is. Now, this is not really a negative, but it is definitely something to pay attention to if you're shopping for an all-around grinder, espresso and filter, that's also a hopper style grinder like this one. You can single dose like I just did with the hopper. The issue is, you know, when you're switching, you know, there is still grounds in there and there's no easy way to kind of get them out. Like, if you tap it, it doesn't really come out. And so you still kind of may end up wanting to purge to get a consistent shot right after you make that big sweeping adjustment. Now, there is a single dosing attachment that you feel like you can bang on the top a little bit more. It costs an extra 25 bucks, but it is available. Now, when you're using it, like if you're stuck on an espresso setting and you do one shot and then you do the next shot, you know, what you put into the top, if you're single dosing, is basically going to be what comes out. So that's great. Or if you're using it with the hopper full of beans, if you just count to 10 or count to 15 or whatever your dose ends up being, you're going to get a pretty consistent result. There are some grounds that stay in there though, dose to dose. When I took it apart to clean it, I would typically find there to be, you know, in between 2.5 to 3 grams of retention in there by the time I got it all out. Now, the good news is, it is really easy to take apart. You don't need any tools. You just pull the hopper off just like that. It's got this little rubber O-ring in here, and it's got a quick release thing holding the burr in, which is really nice. You just pop that off, and you can pop the burr, the outer burr, out just like that, and you can just pull the inner burr just out right like that. So anytime you don't need any tools to open up a grinder and clean it, I'm a big fan. And the outer burr, it's got this red mark on here that lines up with the corresponding red mark on the inside so that you can be sure you're always reassembling your grinder in the right way. One thing that I did think was really thoughtful was they include an extra couple washers so you can shim up your burr if you want to grind even finer for espresso. I didn't find they were needed, but I did like that they included that. It kind of says, you know, hey, we are working with you here. We're going to give you a little extra, even though it's not really needed. So that was good too. So we got some negatives, you know, some static, some noise, some kind of mess, some workflow issues, not quite as good at single dosing. We got some positives, low price, good grind quality. Do I recommend this grinder? And the answer to that is absolutely and wholeheartedly. You know, for 200 bucks, it's kind of hard to argue with anything that can actually do quality espresso and quality filter. You know, you can get hand grinders for less, but not a lot less. And as far as electric grinder goes, you know, it's a good deal. There is one other grinder that came out around the same time as the Baratza ESP, and that is the fellow Opus. It's sitting right back there. Same price, price, slightly different design philosophy. I like both grinders. I've recommended both to different people for different reasons. They have different pluses and minuses in different areas, and I am going to do a video comparing the two of them to help you figure out which might be the best one for you, but they're both good. So if you're wondering, you know, is this something that I should take a chance on? Maybe you've got like an OXO grinder or a KitchenAid grinder and like you want to kind of step it up to get some better espresso at home. Absolutely. This is a fantastic option. And at 200 bucks, it might seem like a lot to you now, but once you get in and you start using it and you see how easy it is and how good the espresso and filter coffee actually is, you'll realize that the money spent was well worth it. Now, is it the same as a $1,000 grinder? Absolutely not. But to get any improvement from this stage, the price does start to go up very quickly. So, you know, this is a great entry point. But I want to hear what you think. Are you more an espresso person or a filter coffee person? Would you consider the ESP, or would you just save the 50 bucks and get the regular Encore that only does filter coffee? Are you an owner of the ESP? I would love to hear your experience and what you think about it. And in the meantime, I hope your next cup of coffee is fantastic, and we'll see you next time.